Warning. Censorship. Warning. Censorship. Warning. Censorship. Warning.
Oh, hi, everybody. Welcome to the Rebel News Daily Live Stream. I'm your host, Sheila Gunn-Reid, and I'm joined by my co-host in Calgary, Adam Sos. Adam, thanks for joining me. I hear our friends in Toronto are dealing with some mildly apocalyptic weather. What's it like in Calgary?
You know, there was forewarnings of terrible snowstorms and wind and everything and nothing. Last night I'm coming home, went out and got some drinks with my family, and suddenly everything's fine, I'm walking, and then this howling wind blew all the straws away. I just caught them. Since then and overnight, it was snowing quite a bit here actually, and it was very windy. I guess it was gusting up to 90, but I don't think quite anything compared to what our friends out east were dealing with. They were as people probably noticed yesterday, we were unable to get to the stream because people couldn't get to our studio. Even the firefighters there were having a tough time getting out. So, yeah, it's pretty wild out there.
Yeah, yesterday I was driving in the worst conditions I've ever driven in my
I guess Sheila is frozen. There might be some of those horrible weather conditions we're talking about out there. Hopefully Sheila is ready to join us again at some point here. But until then, I guess I can get us started. For those of you who aren't familiar or who are new to the live stream, this is something that we used to do once a week, and it was so much fun hanging out with you guys, chatting with you guys, touching base on some of these stories that we started doing it every single day. This was also an opportunity for you guys to interact with us, have some conversations, and chat and support us. You can actually make a contribution through super chats, rumble chats, lots of these other sort of things out there. And that way, towards the end of the show, we're going to respond directly to your conversations. As always, we are on YouTube. But as we mention every time, sorry, Sheila's back. She'll do it. She'll do a better job.
Hi.
I was just saying, at some point we have to leave YouTube. I was doing my version of your rant.
No, it was great. I was eavesdropping. It was wonderful. Yeah. The roads and the driving conditions are so bad where I live that for the second day in a row, the buses didn't run. And so I decided I'm not going to take my life in my hands to drive them to school. So they were all on the internet at the moment that we were on the live stream. So I'm like, get off the internet. I'm trying to work. So anyways, those are mom work from home problems. Let's talk about what we're doing here. So as Adam was pointing out, this is Rebel News Daily Live Stream. Used to just be on Friday, hosted by the big boss man, Ezra Levant. But then the pandemic struck, we were all sent home, and there was more news than ever to talk about. Although you wouldn't know that if you got all your news from the mainstream media who are like, no, everything's fine. No local news whatsoever. Don't worry about it, but give us more money to do less work. We decided one of the best ways to talk about the news of the day is sort of spontaneously and react along with you, which is how the live stream expanded from just Friday to 5 full work days. And it used to be an opportunity for people to support the work that we do completely willingly on YouTube, but then Biden got elected. YouTube didn't have to pretend anymore, so they completely demonetized us. It's soft censorship. They're trying to cut us off from our nearly 1.6 million YouTube subscribers. Even the ones that hate watch us, we appreciate all of you. So that's why we continue to stream on YouTube, but we also stream on 3 other neutral platforms that don't really care about your politics. I don't care about theirs, which is I think is ideal. And they allow you to support the work that we do completely willingly. So that is on Rumble, Odyssey, and Super U. And on all 3 of those platforms, they have different ways that you can support us. I won't get into that because I think we had my delay sort of set us back a little bit, and we've got a completely packed show. But there are ways that you can support us. And if you do that, we'll read your question, query, comment, story idea on air, and Adam or myself will do our very best to address that. And there will come a time where we can no longer broadcast this show that we're doing right now on YouTube, because we will start talking about things that are YouTube unsafe. There are certain things that we cannot talk about on YouTube. And one of those things is questioning the advice of a public health officer, because they are completely infallible. It's the new religion, right? Adam, you and I know that when the Pope says things, sometimes they're infallible, and apparently we have to treat Theresa Tam the same way. So there will come a time where we'll say not goodbye to our YouTube viewers, but just join us on one of those other platforms, and we'll continue the unsafe conversation over there. So I think that's all the nuts and bolts. Let's get into the show, shall we?
Really quickly, too, I do want to mention that the shows are also uploaded as podcasts. So if you are one of those people who maybe wants to head to the gym or doesn't want to sit there or wants to listen to something while working, but wants to catch up on the news of the day, well, go to rebelnews.com, find the podcast, and you can listen along that way as well.
One more thing I want to point out, because it was the snowpocalypse in Toronto. And, Albertans, maybe we're just a little bit better prepared for this. I was saying in the morning meeting, it is a symbol of how much your husband loves you. If as a wife you have aggressive tires on your SUV, that where I'm from, that's it. The more aggressive your tires, the better wife you are, or the better wife that your husband thinks you are. So we're better equipped. It's a cultural thing. We drive a lot more pickup trucks out here. But shout out to Dakota Christensen.
Mm-hmm.
He was
Alberta boy
the real. You know what? We'll take him. He's already passed the test. If he wants to come out here, we'll take him, because he braved the snowpocalypse to go into the office, where it was so bad at the office, Ezra got stuck in the parking lot. Dakota was all of a sudden the showrunner for Ezra Levant's show. If you watched or listened to Ezra Levant's show yesterday, it's because Dakota was so confident in his driving and confident that Jesus was his co-pilot that he went all the way to the office, and we would have had nothing yesterday if it was not for Dakota. And it took him hours to get home. This is him stuck on the side of the road. He said hours and hours and hours to get home. He was just
7
stranded.
hours.
My Lord,
7 hours.
this kid.
Yeah, he's all right. He's all
right. Good boy. His parents did a good job on him. That's for sure.
They did. Yeah, I think so. Hopefully they're listening.
Now, we should talk about something that came out this morning, and it happened over the weekend, and we wanted to talk about it yesterday, but since we had nobody in the office to run this show, and, the learning curve would have been pretty steep for Dakota since he was already doing literally everything else at the company yesterday. Yeah. We wanted to talk about something that happened over the weekend, and that is the hilarity of Nathan Stahl. Yeah. Nathan Stahl is a former member of the Ontario Science Panel, and he quit the Science Panel, the completely apolitical Science Panel, to run for the Ontario Liberal Party provincially. He's running in Toronto St. Paul's. And he, apropos of nothing, accused rebel journalists, and he never said which one, of harassing him, or a rebel journalist, of harassing him at a farmer's market on Saturday. See, today a Rebel News reporter harassed me at a local farmer's market for promoting vaccines. That same reporter made use of the market's shopping service, where volunteers personally shop inside for those without a vaccine certificate. Reasonable accommodation demands civility. So there's a lot going on here. And the one thing that stuck out for me was that he doesn't think that people who disbelieve in the efficacy of vaccines, or perhaps believe in choice, or maybe just not participating in medical segregation, that they shouldn't be allowed to even use
Canadian
anything that's happening.
Is the word you're looking for there, but
yeah, that's right. Sorry. They shouldn't even be allowed to be near the farmer's market. But the thing is, immediately when we saw this, Ezra checked with all of us and to find out if any of us were at a farmer's market. I wasn't in Ontario, so it wasn't me, it wasn't you. We checked with all of our Ontario staff. None of us were at a farmer's market yesterday, although Tamara Ugolini has been known to haunt them. That's her jam. She loves a good farmer's market, but it wasn't Tamara. It wasn't any of us. He completely made it up. And you can tell that there's some attempt here to hide his malice, because he didn't tag Rebel News in it. He made sure that we would have to look to see, or someone would have to send this to us before we ever saw it. As it turns out, it wasn't Tamara. It was somebody that Tamara had interviewed 5 months ago, who has never worked for us, because how do bylines even work? So he said, speak with Rosemary Fry. Rosemary Fry describes herself as an independent researcher journalist. And he links to a story where the byline is Tamara Ugolini interviewing Rosemary Fry. Rosemary Fry has never worked for us. I don't even know if she confronted him at the farmer's market. I have no idea.
Yeah.
It's all simply an allegation. Who can trust a word this guy says to start with? This guy. Yeah, your link is to an article where she's interviewed. She's not the reporter. Literally took me 30 seconds of research to figure out she claims to be an independent journalist and was interviewed by Rebel News. Do people even read anymore? Not in Canada, apparently. This guy took to the internet, tweeted that we harassed him. He received sycophantic replies, sympathetic replies from everybody on the other side. The Globe and Mail health reporter, Andre Picard, he's like, he retweets it. That girl who used to work at Chatelaine, I can't remember her name. She's with the Narwhal now. It doesn't matter. You've never heard of her. But, you know, she's saying, can you quit spreading disinformation because you called them reporters? No, that wasn't the disinformation, as it turns out. I don't even think she deleted her tweet. But then Ezra tweets, we're going to sue the pants off you. I'll paraphrase, but put on some clean underwear because that's all you're going to be wearing after we sue the pants off you. And so then he goes through and deletes all of his tweets. Never apologizes, never says why he deletes them, never even admits that he gets it wrong. Then he deletes them and just pretends like nothing happened. Just move along. I completely libeled these people. I falsely accused him of what is now a crime, by the way. It's a crime to harass a medical professional. And this guy apparently is a doctor. So he accused us of something that is criminal. Well, this morning, he offers an apology and a retraction. But there's a reason for that. Because yesterday morning we hit him with a notice of libel. So this is from Nathan Stahl. Would you mind, Adam, I don't know if you can see that. Maybe you want to read through it. I've been talking.
I can attempt to. Yeah, it's a little blurry on my end, to be honest. You can grab that. I've got plenty to say, however, though.
Okay, let's do this. So I'm just going to bring up his tweet here so that I can see it on my side. Sorry, AD, I should have done this in advance.
Yeah. While you're pulling that up, though, absolutely. Or so you got it. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. On January 15th, while attending a local farmer's market, an anti-vaxxer advocate yelled at me for the work I've done as a physician advocating for seniors, public health, and COVID-19 vaccines during the pandemic, also for Pfizer, but that's just me reading something in. In a previous similar encounter, the individual had shared that they were an investigative journalist and was aware of I was aware of at least one story where the individual was featured on the Rebel News website and attacked my work promoting COVID-19 vaccines for Ontario's long-term sector. Then he links to the article, wherein she was interviewed. Wait, let's keep going.
Yeah.
Then he goes on to malign us, and this is him saying, it's okay to lie about them because they did this to me. And he prefaces it by saying, in unconnected events. Well, then why even mention it? Why even mention it if it's unconnected? Why are you putting it in here then? In unconnected events in December 2021, Rebel News staff, it was Ezra, he owns the company, placed cash bounties on me. It wasn't a cash bounty. It was the cash reward for evidence of locker downers, public health locker downers, enforcement officials, and pro-lockdown politicians breaking their own COVID regulations and recommendations that they force on the little people. We put a cash reward on images of them doing that. We didn't put a cash bounty on any one person. By the way, if you aren't breaking the rules, why are you scared?
Yeah, exactly. The only reason you'd be so upset about this is if you were a scofflaw yourself, and heaven forbid you be held to the same standard you're holding absolutely everyone else on earth to. But sorry, carry on. Let's go through the fake apology.
Right. And anyways, $5,000 if you have those images. And we only want the images. We don't want you confronting the people. Stand afar. Treat it like wildlife photography. Don't disturb the individual in the act of breaking the rules. Just snap a picture, send it to us. That's all. In tweeting about the incident at the farmer's market, I described the individual as a Rebel News reporter, as I had believed that to be the case. Why did you believe that? You didn't even read the article. I have since been informed by Rebel News and literally the entire internet that day, by the way, that I was wrong in making that connection. The individual does not work for Rebel News, although they were featured by them in the first article linked above. Upon learning this information, I deleted the tweet. No, he doubled down and continued to tweet that this was evidence that she somehow worked for us. The only time he deleted his tweets was when Ezra's like, I hope you have a good lawyer because you're going to need one. Anyways. Despite this today, despite that he lied and lied and lied, didn't offer a retraction or an explanation and simply deleted everything on the hopes that the whole affair would go away, poor Nathan got a notice of libel. It goes on. Despite this and everything he did to cover his tracks, today I was delivered a notice, or a libel notice from David Elmala of Relaw LLP, who has been hired to represent Rebel News. David's the best, by the way. David's amazing. So Nathan should be scared. The right thing was to offer an apology because David's amazing. As it was an honest mistake on my part, I wish to clear the record. Representation for Rebel News has informed me the following statement was required in order to avoid litigation. So let me state, not I want to retract and apologize because it is the right thing to do because I got this wrong and I damaged their reputations and I falsely accused someone of a crime. Let me avoid getting sued. That's where his moral compass is at. He goes, I falsely accused a Rebel News reporter of harassing me at a farmer's market January 15th, 2022. This is not true. I retract my prior statement and I apologize to Rebel News and all of its reporters for the false accusation. Once again, back to the unrelated baloney. Unrelated to the aforementioned incidents, I must stress that I will continue to use whatever platforms I have to defend my fellow healthcare professionals and members of our community who deserve better than to be harassed while trying to do their jobs. I had people threatening to assault me because of his false accusations. I had people saying, it's perfectly legal now to kick a Rebel News reporter in the nuts. Well, I don't have those, being a lady, but I will tell you that if you put your hands on me,
personally attacked, but
if they put their hands on me, I will drop you like a sack of hot garbage, and then you're going to be sued. And that is because he let those false accusations that we were wild and crazy harassers just hang out there in the world. He's the one who incited violence against us because of his misinformation, but he's still the victim if you follow him on the internet. Anyways, let's keep continuing. I'm also grateful to the Canadian Medical Association and the federal Liberal government, of course, here's the partisan garbage, for the recent passage of C3, which as of January 16, 2022, makes it illegal to intimidate a healthcare professional or patient. Dr. Nathan Stahl, liar.
So like within that statement, once again, is I think another instance of libel where he is stating that someone placed a bounty on his head and implying furthermore that we are harassing him or people involved with us are harassing him and breaking the law and therefore should be criminally prosecuted. This victim mentality comes as no surprise to me when their supreme leader, Justin Trudeau himself, is Mr. You must have remembered it differently. These people are the bullies. These people are the tyrants. These people are the liars. And as you said, the sycophantic response from people stating that, Rebel News is all misinformation, blatantly unaware that they're reinforcing a misinformation narrative. And this all in line, it's so liberal, even though this is the Ontario party, not the federal party, but that little tip of the hat to Mr. Trudeau, these are the bullies. These are the misinformation spreaders. And listen, the thing, unlike Dakota, whose parents can be very proud of him, this gentleman, if his parents are still with us, should have a chat with him about doing the right thing. Rebel News, if we make a mistake, we will apologize for it. We won't say, well, you're terrible and you do all these terrible things and you should be criminally charged. I'm legally required to state. If we get something wrong, we say, we got something wrong. Here's a clarification. Or if someone responds when we're following up on a story saying, well, actually, here's some additional information maybe you didn't have, we post a correction. That's quite simply the right thing to do. It doesn't matter if you agree or don't agree. We're always told follow the story where it leads you. What happened here is he had the course of several days to issue an apology and delete the tweets. He didn't even delete the tweets right away when it was made abundantly clear that they were not true. He carried on because he thought that this was going to be a shining moment. He thought this would endear him. And inevitably, these people are all totem pole climbers, so to speak. And his intention with that nod to the Liberal government is some federal politics down the line. This was what he thought was going to get him that leading role. I jokingly say juicy sommelier moment, as Dave Chappelle says, but this is that moment where he was like, oh, I've been victimized and I can climb up into the ranks of the Liberal elites. Unfortunately, the real fact checkers were on this one and you got caught right away. Frankly, you could have addressed this right off the bat. You could have deleted it or tweeted, I'm sorry, I thought this was a rebel. That was completely the impression I was at. We could make fun of your reading comprehension skills and that would be the extent of it. But no, you decided to leave it up. You decided to put out this half-hearted apology and let the consequences fall to where they may. You say that you're going to continue standing up for doctors in whatever platforms you can. Well, fortunately, we have a boss who stands up for us in the court of law. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, and even still today, people are saying, I'm so sorry you had to go through this. Go through what? I'm skeptical that anybody even yelled at him at this point because he just nuked his own credibility. I need to see pictures or it didn't happen. I know what we didn't do. I know what he did. And I know his credibility is completely shot. But then people are saying, oh, some people just live on frivolous lawsuits. Oh, this is not frivolous. You defamed us. You defamed us and you libeled us. And you did it for sympathy and clicks and likes, like for clout.
Yeah, and you're a political. This is an average Joe with 10 followers. This is a political candidate with former basically public office. He was on the Science Council, moving his way up. And this was retweeted and shared by a bunch of media advocates and activists and members of political influence. So the question of whether or not this was damaging is I think beyond question. It's self-evident. Yeah, there we go. Yankee clipped out the only part that should have been included from that entire thing. That is the crux of it. Nathan Stahl falsely accused Rebel News of harassing him. That's it. That's the extent of it.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, and this poor man here, that he had to apologize for his lies, while I'm getting people saying, oh, it's perfectly fine to assault you now. If you're out and about and I see you, I'm going to assault you because of what Nathan Stahl lied and said we did. Anyway, don't even try to touch me, people. You'll be so sorry. The lawsuit will be the least of your worries.
For me, it goes without saying, but yes. Unreal.
Anyways, we should, since this
let's talk about other politicians expecting special treatment and maybe not telling the entirety of the truth. Get into that one. Casey Madhu. So the Minister of Justice. So the Minister of Justice for Alberta is going to take a step back while Premier Jason Kenney launches an investigation. Now, this is a story that's been sort of milling in the background, and I guess it's been a week where there hasn't been an official statement coming out. So I think they were hoping that this would go away. Well, it isn't going away. So ultimately what has happened here is that Casey Madhu, who is the Minister of Justice in Alberta, was basically caught talking on his cell phone while driving in a playground zone. He then received a ticket. What's troubling here is, and apparently he did pay the ticket, but he placed a call to the police chief to discuss this matter, which very much seems like interference. Now, what they're saying about this, and I don't know how true this is, it may be true, but the fact that he's stepped back and there's been an investigation, there were some questions about dubious police practices within the police force. And apparently Casey Madhu simply called to say, we are saying you need to clean up your act, and I was not on my phone, and suddenly I'm getting pulled over and getting tickets. Is that the core of it? So the police chief did confirm that he never at any point asked for the ticket to be scrapped. He was just saying, is this on the level? What's going on? But I think there are more appropriate judicial processes to investigate such a thing than personally calling up the police chief yourself. My other major concern here is there's been long-standing sort of allegations or suggestions out there that some of the persecution taking place of Christian pastors has been at the behest of ministers or politicians calling police chiefs, particularly here in Calgary, Edmonton. And what this may very well do is set up a precedent that we are seeing government officials calling police chiefs and inquiring through informal channels to maybe have favors done, maybe have things looked into a little more closely. And that is extremely troubling. And frankly, there's no excuse, and he should know better.
Well, and I'll be perfectly clear. Of the politicians in cabinet, I probably liked Casey the most. You know, he's got a great story. He's a immigrant to Canada. He worked his way up from the absolute bottom into a law degree, and then he's the head lawman in Canada. He was the epitome of the conservative work ethic. But then he started locking up pastors, not doing anything about it, being completely silent on the issue. And in the past, he did something that I agreed with. He ended carding in Alberta. I kind of used to be pro-carding, and I still am in some instances where it's used as an intelligence gathering tool. But this was just like stopping people and asking them for their ID apropos of nothing. This wasn't like, hey, I know that guy is running around with that gangster. Let's put together the dots and figure out who the known associates are. It wasn't like that. It was just like, again, to use the phrase apropos of nothing, just stopping people on the streets and getting their ID. Not cool. So he ended that in Alberta, and I was kind of happy about that. But then nobody put two and two together that now you're vax carding people. and nobody thought like, oh, you ended that. And everyone was like, yeah, that's a great social justice thing. Why are you vax carding people who incidentally tend to be minorities, the unvaccinated, right? And now even this conversation, the statement that Casey had, it just rubs me the wrong way. He said, in the morning of March 10th, shortly after leaving my home, I was pulled over by an officer of the Edmonton Police Service. The officer indicated that he had observed me driving while distracted, alleging that I was on my phone. I disagreed, stating that I was not on my phone as it was inside my pocket. Okay, well, this is just a matter for, like, take it to the judge, tell it to the judge. I think Yankee got a distracted driving ticket once. You know, it's just something the cops give out. And if you didn't do it, we're all for fighting tickets that if you think you have a legal leg to stand on, fight it. And I'm pretty sure Casey Mayhew's a lawyer. So fight that ticket. Fight that ticket. You're a lawyer, right? Anyways, he goes, later I spoke to Chief Dale McPhee. During the timing of the incident, I wanted to ensure that I was not being unlawfully surveilled following the controversy surrounding the Lethbridge Police Service. So this was the Lethbridge Police Service were, I think it was Shannon Phillips. She was the environment minister at the time, and she alleged that she had been unlawfully surveilled as a member of the NDP. So anyways, he wanted to say, oh, are they following me? I'm pretty sure the cops like to stake out school zones. Early in the morning, we've all seen this. This is not like a sting operation like what they pulled with Kerry Diott years ago. This was just, you know, they're in a school zone looking for distracted drivers, people going too fast and not paying attention. And then Mayhew also says, I also raised concerns around profiling of racial minorities that was in the media at the time. McPhee assured me that this was most definitely not the case, and I accepted him at his word.
Yeah, so
this is a run-of-the-mill distracted driving ticket, and we've got social justice issues just hammered into here.
There's two possibilities here. One, and I mean, I think it's funny because if it's the latter, then this is ridiculous. But so the two possibilities are here. One, he got a ticket and then called to sort of see if he could make it go away, and it didn't really work, and he got caught.
One of these.
So now he's making a giant story about how there's racial profiling and they're surveilling him and the police force is inherently corrupt. That's possibility one. Possibility two is that the police force is entirely corrupt and racist, which is a narrative that I don't think existed prior to him wanting to get out of this ticket. So those are the two possibilities. So, I mean, if it isn't true that was Casey's concern, it's crazy that much that level of allegation was brought forward in response to this. So if there's no truth to that surveillance race narrative, then the fact that he brought all of this up to cover up a distracted driving ticket, which frankly, and I mean, talk about Streisand effect, he could have just paid it and then that would have been that. That's it. It's not demerits. I think he got it in the mail. I guess he got pulled over. So maybe there's some demerits, but regardless, with a ticket, you pay it. That's it. That's it. Couple demerits. He turned it into this giant calamitous event where he now has to step back and is being investigated. I am very much interested to see what this investigation reveals, because it's either that maybe there was a little bit of dishonesty or an attempt to cover something up, or that there's like inherent underlying systematic racism and corruption and political pressure coming from a police force. So it remains to be seen, and we shall certainly follow it moving forward, but certainly not the scandal the UCP needs right now, given how they're faring. So not ideal. Speaking of police forces not necessarily doing their jobs, maybe now we can jump to this insane
great segue. Great segue.
LA train footage, which is absolutely unbelievable. So Vedi can pull it up. For those unfamiliar, here we go. We keep hearing of train burglaries in LA on the scanner. So we went to Lincoln Heights to see it all. And there's looted packages as far as the eye can see. Amazon,
this.
UPS,
it's like
unused
Bombay.
COVID test. It looks like Bombay doesn't look that bad. Like it's actually on a level that third world countries, like, it's not quite there. And the wild thing with this that's absolutely unbelievable is like, this is all, there's another tweet somewhere where there's like a delayed package. Someone went there and scanned a UPS code in one of the looted packages, and they found out the person had like a delayed notification. But this is LA. They're just like running up. There's other footage too where they're just like storming the train when it stopped and unloading TVs, and people are walking away with TVs, and the police are doing nothing. This is the defund the police world that we're living in. It's absolutely, there we go. Like, look at that. They're just strolling away with TVs with nothing to be seen. And it's absolutely unbelievable, because if some kid went into a convenience store and stole a pack of bubble gum, they'd probably put him in some Young Offenders Act. But then here, this is happening and they're just looting TVs. Like, why is the SWAT team not being sent in a paddy wagon to lock these guys up? And it's because it's California and they don't want to escalate things. So they're going to allow looting and raiding and...
Who's the DA there? This looks like Soros-influenced DAs, where they say, okay, well, we're not going to prosecute shoplifting. We're not going to do the whole broken windows policing that cleaned up New York, when New York, at the height of its like worst crime explosion, I think they had 2,000 murders a year there. And then they said, no, we're going to broken window policing. So we're going to not tolerate the little things, and also deal with the big things. But this is the reverse. And this is like, you look at this, and when I say it looks like Bombay, I mean, maybe like this looks worse. Like, look at that.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And there's COVID tests, there's medical supplies, insulin, like all this stuff just looted, absolutely destroyed, left by the wayside. And this is just like the outcome of this sort of defund the police mentality in society, where certain groups of people can do no wrong and it's wrong to enforce this. That is being stolen from companies. Like, every one of those instances, stealing one of those massive TVs is major theft. And they have footage of it, and they simply will not enforce or act on it. It's unbelievable. Like, this footage is absolutely something. I'm sure people elsewhere in the world, I mean, Canada included, are looking at this and saying, oh my gosh, this country is going down the drain. It's brutal. Like, and the extent of it, the stretch, it's just going to fill up. And they know this is happening, and they're absolutely failing to act.
Well, and just think, like, this is not a free crime, right? Like, the costs of theft And replacing this stuff gets factored into the cost of your goods. So this raises the price for the consumer who's actually buying these things as opposed to stealing these things. So when you think, oh, you know, like this is a victimless crime, the big companies are just going to eat the cost and they'll just reship the item to the person who bought it. Oh, no, my friend. This stuff trickles down to the consumer. There's nobody eating this increased cost except you at home every time you order something online.
Well, and I mean, and how many people, there's medical equipment they're waiting on, how many people won't get a present in time for a kid's birthday? Like that's stuff going to people to live their lives, not to mention that we're dealing with massive supply chain issues. And then not only are we dealing with that, but now it's okay to intermittently loot the limited supplies that we do have, and authorities won't do anything, just like they're not doing anything about the supply chain issues. It's absolutely ridiculous and absolutely staggering. And for another smooth segue, as long as you're okay with this, it's funny how reflective this is of the Biden saying that George Floyd's death was more impactful than Martin Luther King Jr. On the MLK holiday. I don't know if AD has that clip. I'd love to get that audio, because for people who can't believe it. Here, let's listen to this.
But even Dr. King's assassination did not have the worldwide impact that George Floyd's death did.
Yeah. Like,
wow.
to say that, like, is absolutely staggering. And I think, sadly, that is what this movement started by people like Martin Luther King Jr. That movement, that beautiful thing about equality and justice, has turned into victim narratives. And don't get me wrong, the police officers went overboard. I completely agree with that. But George Floyd is not caught. He held a gun to a pregnant woman's stomach or head, I can't believe. He was a drug addict with a repeated history of violence and aggression. And the only reason that blew up to the extent it did, unlike the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., who was a passionate preacher, advocate for rights, advocate for equality, all around. I mean, there's some sort of stories going around about some of his personal life, but regardless, generally a well-respected individual. George Floyd was very, I know, very much set up to be like that. But then the facts just simply didn't pan out. And for any sort of sane movement whatsoever, mourn the passing of George Floyd, hope that there's de-escalation strategies implemented, all that stuff is absolutely fine. But for the president of the United States to say that his death is more significant and had a bigger global impact than the death of Martin Luther King is absolutely staggering. It's unbelievable that he said that. And it wasn't one of those right after he said it, you could see his face kind of go, oh, well, maybe I didn't really mean to say that. He was all in on that statement and all in on that sentiment, which I can't believe. I can't believe that the president, like that, Donald Trump, he said some wild and outlandish things, but I don't know if he ever said anything quite so crazy as George Floyd's death was more significant than Martin Luther King's.
It's grotesque. I think Alveda King, she's the niece of Martin Luther King Jr. She was on Fox News last night and she was having none of this. Like, absolutely none of this. Imagine how that sounds to the family of Martin Luther King, by the way, that, you know, your father, this civil rights leader, he's sort of playing second fiddle to George Floyd these days. Just gross. AD, going back to the story we just talked about the train looting. I just want to go back to that for a second because I said something about George Soros funded DAs. And before people think that I'm a conspiracy theorist, like I'm just obsessed with George Soros, I'm definitely not. This is an article from the New York Post that I just sent to AD because I read the entire internet every day before I go on air. And the LA District Attorney, George Gascon, was backed by George Soros and has presided over a crime spike since he was inaugurated in December 2020. So Tom Cotton, God love that man. Everywhere Soros-backed prosecutors go, crime follows, said Arkansas Republican Senator Tom Cotton. He calls them legal arsonists. These legal arsonists have abandoned their duty to public safety by pursuing leniency even for the most heinous crime, and they often flat out refuse to charge criminals for shoplifting, vagrancy, and entire categories of misdemeanors. In Los Angeles, where critics say that criminal justice reforms have recently led to a wave of looting and violent crimes, Soros funneled more than $2.5 million into a California political action committee to support Gascon, that's the district attorney there, who left the San Francisco District Attorney's Office to run against incumbent Jackie Lacey in 2020. The Cuban-born Gascon, who moved with his family to the U.S. in 1967, said in his December 2020 inauguration speech that the rush to incarcerate generations of kids of color had torn the social fabric of our communities. The status quo hasn't made us safe. And so they're just deciding not to prosecute these things. And this is like a thing George Soros does with prosecutors. Yeah. And it's the poor people actually have to live with this because crime doesn't come to rich neighborhoods. They can pay for private security and fencing and surveillance. The crime comes to poor communities, and poor communities have to live with this billionaire deciding how they deal with crime in their community.
It's anyway. And I mean, I figured you were looking something up on that. It's unbelievable. The other thing too is the underlying racism of it. Like the racism that, well, these people are going to commit crimes because that's in their nature. And I'm not saying that. I'm saying this is very much the mentality of people like this. And we can't really go after them for this. That's active racism, not applying the same standards of behavior for conduct within society to everyone evenly is racism. And it's funny, these progressives very often they will espouse the bleeding heart talking points, but in action and in policy, it's anything but equality or anything but equal opportunity. It's absolutely the way that they operate. They want people to fit into these boxes. They want people very much to fit token roles. And when people don't fit into those boxes, they don't like them. Again, going back to the Biden connecting these stories, what was it? He said, if you don't vote for me, you're not black, basically, or if you vote for Donald Trump, you're not black. Like, you don't get to pick those boxes. You don't get to say that certain communities do this, certain communities do that, because we believe in society as individuals. If you group people together and judge them as a group, that's stereotyping at the least, or racism at the very worst. And that's ultimately what these policies do. Because I can assure you, if a bunch of white rednecks rolled up to a train and stopped the train and started looting, there would be a SWAT team there and it would be some Waco level incident. That's what would happen. Because unfortunately, lots of these progressives do enforce politics in a very racist way.
Yeah, it's the bigotry of low expectations, which in and of itself is paternalism, which these progressives won't shut up about. But they're guilty of it. We should move on to the Genocide Olympics, because that's in the news. That's coming up very shortly. We've got a report from Sports Illustrated saying that athletes headed to Beijing for the Olympics, the Genocide Olympics, are urged to use burner phones and disposable computers because of the high risk for cyber spying at the 2022 Beijing Winter Games. The Olympic committees for the Netherlands, Great Britain, Australia, and Canada issued recommendations for their athletes as each country anticipates China to implement strong surveillance during the Winter Games. Why are we going to these Winter Games? These feel like the Hitler Olympics, and we're just like, yeah, we didn't learn anything from that. Let's go again.
Why is this allowed to carry on? Why are the same people involved with the Olympic Committee who keep choosing China while they're committing a genocide? Why is, and we'll talk about the Z speaking at the Davos Agenda as though he's some heroic world leader. Like, they're literally telling these athletes that they should use burner phones, VPNs to mask their information, discard any sort of electronics so you're not tracked when you're back at home, because the government of China, who we're allowing to host the Olympics, is going to spy on you. What sort of wacky nonsense world are we living in? It's absolutely unbelievable. We talk about like North Korea as this sort of out there crazy country we don't deal with, and that they should just be left in isolation because their egregious treatment of human beings, their lacks of freedoms. Well, China is that, plus they meddle in international affairs on a level you can't believe. All of these international committees, ranging from the World Economic Forum to the United Nations, to the Olympic committees, to the sporting committees, are clearly bought and paid for. And I mean, I think that goes without saying when someone committing a genocide is on a bunch of peace councils and women's rights councils and all these other things. It's absolutely vexing. And I, for one, think it's insane and absolutely unethical that any modern civilized country is attending these Olympics. Plain, like, period. Plain and simple. Have some other games and some real country that doesn't, well, I mean, with COVID, we can't talk about this too much, but how many countries are fully respecting people's human rights? But regardless, find a country that isn't actively carrying out a genocide, maybe to have your Olympics in, instead of just jumping between China and, say, maybe one of the other countries that doesn't have a ton of freedom, Russia. Just jumping between those two countries, absolutely wild and unbelievable.
Well, China is as bad as North Korea, but smarter, because North Korea isolated themselves and China thought, no. The way to take over the world is to engage them, is to own them. And we will look back on these Olympics. If China doesn't successfully take over the world, we will look back on these Olympics the same way we look back on Hitler's Olympics, as a propaganda exercise that the world should never have participated in. And we will be judged appropriately for this, I think. Again, if China doesn't take over the world and rewrite history, looking back, people are going to say, knowing what you knew, why the hell were you there? And I asked that question today.
Speaking of China taking over the world, Klaus
Look at
Schwab,
you, you're so good at this today.
Klaus Schwab introduced the president and dictator of China at the Davos Agenda 2022 as the keynote speaker, a model citizen that we should all be looking up to. Do we have the footage of that introduction? By the way, for those who don't know, Klaus Schwab, one of the architects of the Great Reset. Here we go.
Yes.
At this pivotal moment, I see several priorities for the global agenda. We must continue to fight against the global pandemic. We must revitalize the global economy and accelerate its transition to net zero. We must preserve biodiversity by deploying nature-based solutions, and we must narrow the gap between the rich and the poor to achieve more sustainable global development.
And now with more on this, we're going to go to the leader of China, the #1 polluter in the world, with the greatest gaps in wealth between the poor and the rich. And it's absolutely insane that after saying those comments, some of which are general and fine, and others are clearly globalist climate control propaganda, but after making those comments, throwing to the leader of China, the dictator of China, as the model that we should follow for this. And he went on to rant at length about how bad Western countries that are rallying against China are. The Davos Agenda should be called the China Agenda, because what more is it than that? It's absolutely unbelievable.
In a speech where this guy, sorry, just give me a second. In a speech where this guy is introducing net zero, as you know, the climate, we're already demonetized, so I can say it. The climate scam is near and dear to my heart, because we are unfairly attacked as killing the planet. And don't get me wrong, I love coal. I love coal-fired electricity. I think we should never get off it. Alberta's the Saudi Arabia of coal, and some of the cleanest burning coal on the planet, by the way. So we should be using it. But mainland China has the greatest number of coal-fired stations of any nation on the face of this beautiful earth. As of 2021, there are nearly 1,100 operational coal-fired plants in the country, 4 times as many as India, which is second. And every single day, China accounts for over 50% of the total global coal electricity generation. And I got to listen to how China is the partner for net zero, and I've got to phase out the oil sands.
Yeah.
Excuse me? No thanks.
And the wild thing here is, I think what China and these globalist elites have in common is that they're both unflinching in lying. China, yes, China, yes, 100% net zero, green, good. Justin Trudeau plays the same game. If you're one of the people who, no matter what you do, it doesn't really matter what you do in their world. You can do whatever. You can be in the Sky Palace. You can drive a sports car. You can have a yacht and 10 houses. You can have a concentration camp full of Muslims in China, for example. That's all fine as long as you nod your head to the Great Reset talking points. Then you're part of the club. If you dare pose any challenges or suggest maybe that we should defend human rights, that transitioning off of industries like they did when they tried to force mass industrialization from agriculture in China, the Great Leap Forward, where 100 million people or so died. If you're suggesting that maybe we shouldn't be transitioning to this ultra renewable green energy when it just isn't ready because we're all going to die, and we don't want people to die. Basically, if you're advocating for human rights in any way, shape, or form on principle, beyond these empty talking points that don't have any sort of substance, if you have any principles at all, you're not part of this group. But you can do anything, including the biggest slave labor plants in the country, which, by the way, a massive source of China's wealth is the fact that they have slave labor. Very often when we see these empires grow, it's because they're violating people's rights. If you're one of those people, but you're willing to nod your head and tip your hat, well, then you're part of the boys club and you get to sit at the globalist table. This goes back to the train looting and those rich communities that you talked about. These rich people want everyone else living in relative squalor and scrapping and just struggling to get by, like the vast majority of people are in China, so that their little inside club can be rich and live in their gated communities behind walls. Because the less we have, the more they have. They want every one of us renting, not owning land. They want every one of us using a car share service instead of buying a car. They want every one of us paying monthly for everything and never owning anything, never acquiring anything, because the only people in their minds who have the right to acquire, spend, consume natural resources, jet around the world, be on mega yachts is them, nobody else. That's what their end game is. The whole mentality of this Great Reset being some sort of thing for the masses to reset everybody's debt, to make things be great for everybody, the vast population, is simply not true. None of their actions speak to that purported end goal. All of their actions speak to centralized control and a lessened quality of life for the rest of us.
Hallelujah. Should we move on to the next thing, because we have 9 minutes left in the show? Of course, we're probably going to go over.
Oh my gosh.
But speaking of anti-human agendas, there's Pope Fauci moaning about disinformation. So we're going to show this, and then we're going to get into the things that they won't allow us to talk about on YouTube because we're not allowed.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I believe the entire world is facing, but we certainly are facing it in a very, very disconcerting way in the United States, is the amount of disinformation that is accompanying what should be a problem where everyone pulls together against the common enemy, which is the virus. We have disinformation that is entirely destructive to a comprehensive public health endeavor. You know, one of the things
Yeah, entirely. You're entirely right, and most of it is coming from you.
Yes, thank you.
Not to question officials, but he's saying this to himself. What he said mere weeks prior, he is then sort of correcting and then saying that was misinformation, but he was the one saying it. Very Orwellian. But I think on that note, we are going to transition off of YouTube, where we can continue to talk about this without overlords ruling over us. So